In 1982, Knoxville hosted the World's Fair. It brought more than 11 million people from 22 different countries over to a small town in Tennessee. This event was primarily funded and led by Jake Butcher, the owner of United American Bank. The fair was a success, and many people enjoyed seeing how Knoxville went from a small town that nobody had heard of to a town that was hosting the World's Fair. This success, however, did not last long. In 1983, the United American Bank was declared insolvent, and soon his other 8 banks were insolvent too. This ruined Knoxville for a long time because most of the projects that were supposed to help and renovate the World's Fair sites were funded by Jake Butcher's banking empires.
Thank you and welcome to the 1982 World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee.
The man who started it all was the chairman of the board, Jake Butcher. He was born in Union County, Tennessee. Starting in 1968, he and his brother, C.H. Butcher, were buying stocks in multiple Tennessee banks. By 1974, they controlled or owned part of 8 banks. By 1982, UIB accounted for over half the business loans in Knoxville. His net worth was about $34 million. He ran and lost for governor twice, but the connections he made with important people during that time was one of the main reasons the World's Fair was hosted in Knoxville.
The flags of 22 participating nations were raised, and President Ronald Reagan delivered the Keystone Address.
Jimmy Carter and then President Ronald Reagan both came to the World's Fair. International participation, such as the president of a Japanese chemical company, the Crown Prince of Jordan, the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos and his wife, part of China's Great Wall, and even a Peru mummy came to the World's Fair.
We have people like France, Italy, Germany, Australia, Mexico, Canada, Hungary, and the jewel in the crown, we think, the People's Republic of China. It's their first World's Fair ever.
For the first time in 165 years, the Tennessee state legislature had a session in Knoxville. Even out-of-this-world participation came from the International Space Station.
All you folks down there, this is our 5th day in orbit, and we're on our 65th orbit of the Earth. Our spacecraft is in good shape, and we've had a challenging mission.
In this 11 million people crowd was Glenn Froese, a New Yorker who came down to visit the fair after already seeing the New York World's Fair 18 years earlier.
It was the year after Aunt Mary Lee and I got married. So we probably were trying to figure out what we want to do for our vacation. And we really enjoyed the World's Fair in New York, back in 64, 65, I think it was. So we figured, why not go down to Knoxville and see the World's Fair in Knoxville? So I think we went kind of as one of our first vacations. Well, I think the highlight of the fair was that gold sun sphere. And I would think that if anybody had gone to the World's Fair in Knoxville, that's probably the landmark that most people remember. So that's the most memorable building, from the World's Fair.
Knoxville has its sun sphere.
It's a 26-story tower with a 5-story restaurant complex on the top of it. 2 floors for observation, 2 floors for the restaurant, and 1 for the kitchen area.
Now, I have heard that there's going to be gold dust in the glass.
That's true.
The sun sphere in total costed about $4 million, with the windows costing $1,000 each. Construction started January 23, 1981, and it became the first spherical building in the United States. During the World's Fair, an average of 60,000 people a day went up to see it. The World's Fair ended, and the Sun Sphere suddenly lost its revenue. In 1984, with only 30 visitors a day, the restaurant on the Sun Sphere had to close. The bank threatened to foreclose it, and eventually it fell into the hands of the city of Knoxville.
I hate this place.
I came in there with this strong memory of the World's Fair in New York, which was a 2-year very elaborate production. And when I went to the Knoxville World's Fair, I would say I was underwhelmed.
Well, I thought it would be good for the city at first. But when you think about so many people that's going to be out of a job when the World's Fair is over, it's something else to think about.
Feel about the World's Fair before it came?
I didn't want it here. I wrote a bunch of letters to the Journal stating that I didn't want it here.
Okay, now how do you feel about it now?
I think we're going to end up paying for it.
So your feelings haven't changed that much?
No.
By November 1st, 1982, the FDIC found unsecured loans and forged documents. By February, UAB declared bankruptcy.
The Commissioner of Banking for the state of Tennessee, Billy Adams, has determined the United American Bank of Knoxville is insolvent as a result of large and unusual loan losses.
Jake and his brother both pled guilty to charges on conspiracy and bank fraud. They both served a little less than 7 years before going on parole. Most of the fair sites were torn down because there were no more loans from the United American Bank to maintain them. Suddenly, downtown Knoxville became a dangerous, crime-filled area with no upkeep from anyone. Then came Scott West, an entrepreneur with a goal to revitalize downtown and bring people back. He owned shops and restaurants on Market Square and was showing profits, but in 2006, that all went away. It turned out that he and his brother were doing a drug smuggling operation in which he was using his downtown Knoxville locations to launder the money. He went to court and then spent the next 4.5 years in prison. Just like the Butcher brothers, they were witty, had a grand vision for Knoxville, and were arrested on charges of conspiracy because of how fraudulent money was part of their vision. Today, Knoxville is full of art, culture, scientific discoveries, and people wanting the best for what used to be the center of the world in 1982.